I'm Aaron Johnson from Aerospace Engineering, and CRLT-Engin has had an enormous impact on my teaching here at Michigan. I've participated in a lot of the teaching circles, the workshops, and I've done a midterm student feedback session every semester I've taught here. And no matter how many times I teach a course, there's always stuff that I can improve upon, and the CRLT-Engin consultants help me to find out what is not working as well as it could, and they give me actionable ways that I can fix that. They do a great job of cutting through individual concerns to really take the temperature of the whole class. They also tell me what I'm doing well in the class, which is always great to hear. It can be easy to focus on what's bad, so I appreciate hearing what I'm doing well. But really, the best part of CRLT-Engin is the people. They're all outstanding. They're committed to excellence. They're committed to helping us faculty improve our teaching here at Michigan. And while they know so much, they're also humble and they're willing to meet faculty where we are to help us improve our teaching. And just so grateful and thankful for everything CRLT-Engin has done.
Good evening. I'm Gren Agresar. I'm Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives at CRLT in Engineering. And I am sorry I'm not there celebrating with you. I am out of the country with my daughter. CRLT has impacted my career and goals in many ways. Well, it is my career. But when I joined 7 years ago, I was undergoing a lot of personal changes, and working with and for Tertia has truly been a blessing. I have been able to bring my authentic self to work and be creative and make mistakes and recover from those mistakes and learn tremendously. With a PhD in engineering and a master's in education, I thought I was a unicorn. And at CRLT, I have found many others like me. I found my people, like Debbie Covington loves to say. And CRLT, one of the things that I love about working at CRLT-Engin is the integrity and authenticity that we work with. We are very value-driven. We practice what we teach. We talk about asset-based learning, and we look for our own assets and make an asset map and figure out how we can use our collective assets to reach our goals for the year. We talk about equity in engineering, and we practice equity in hiring. We look for how to be more equitable in all our processes, and it's not always easy. And that is a challenge that I love taking with my peers. Learning with and from my peers is one of my biggest joys. We really hold each other accountable for living by our principles. What is my vision for CRLT Engine in the future? Well, more of what we do now. We are collaborators, we're innovators, we bridge research with practice in teaching and learning. Uh, we are connectors and influencers, but we don't do anything completely by ourselves. We are part of this bigger ecosystem called the College of Engineering, Michigan Engineering, and part of the bigger University of Michigan. And the more reports I read, the more people I meet, the more faculty I meet, the more students I meet, the more I see that there are so many people out there who are incredibly smart and incredibly dedicated to doing better for our students, doing the best we can in terms of teaching and learning, and leading the nation and the world in engineering education. And I see us being a part of that. Uh, and I'm proud of being a part of that. I envision growing those collaborations to continue to improve our impact. I think that I would like our curricular work with departments to grow. I would like to grow our assessment services, our learning analytics services. And I would like to continue centering equity in our teaching and our processes. And of course, continue to have fun along the way. More connections, more impact with joy and heart. That is my vision.
Hi, my name is Steve Yalasov, and I'm a faculty member in the Material Science and Engineering Department. I've been in Michigan a long time, since 1989, and when I first got here, I learned about CRLT. There wasn't a CRLT engine at the time. And very early on in my education about how to become a teacher, I heard a lot from Susan Montgomery, who actually wasn't in CRLT, but she worked with a lot of people who were, who taught us about active learning and how all the research was pointing to active learning being a much better idea than just stand and deliver lecture. So when 1994 rolled around and I heard about what Eric Mazur was doing in the physics community of eliminating lecture entirely for team-based, project-based type approaches, or at least starting with peer instruction even in a large lecture hall, I was very intrigued. Well, it turned out that my paths crossed with Eric for another reason, because his research area was the same as mine, ultrafast laser material interaction. And so in 1996, I wrote a Whitaker grant to CRLT and got lots of help from Connie Cook and Matt Kaplan to put into our lecture hall up in engineering a wired audience response system. This was probably one of the very first clicker systems in the country. Eric had pioneered this with a small company that had built this thing for NASA for doing training. So we used TI-83 calculators that we would plug into ports on the wall, and we got huge amounts of help from Kane, especially John Muckler, who led the whole installation of our wired network. And this allowed me to get audience response showing up to my screen as a histogram so I could see how students were answering, and I could choose to display that or not, depending on what I wanted to do in the classroom. And this was amazing. And it was followed the next year by a second phase 2 Whitaker grant, which I did with Tim McKay, where we got wireless boxes, these Fleetwood boxes that I believe the physics department still uses to this day. And it was incredible. I learned all sorts of things. I learned that students weren't really listening to me in lecture. I could tell them something and ask them with this poll, and even with the answer right up on the board, they got it wrong. And so it was incredibly eye-opening to me, and it was awesome. But soon I stopped doing that because it really just got in the way. It took too much time. It got in the way of the lecture. And it took me another 15 years to finally learn that it wasn't that the clicker was getting in the way of the lecture, but it was the other way around. The lecture was getting in the way of the clicker. And so many years later, in around 2012, I got another grant from CRLT to try flipping one of my classrooms. So I taught Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then there was a recitation for a 4-credit course. And this is when CRLT was up in engineering. So this was great. So I got to work with CRLT consultants like Tertia back then, and Cindy Finelli was in charge of this whole operation, and it was awesome. And so I was able to not lecture on Wednesdays, and I got money to make short inspirational videos about whatever I was going to be lecturing on Wednesday to convince students to read the book, to do the homework, to do the hard work of learning, because ultimately learning's real simple. The student has to do it. All we can do is guide them to the right way to learn and encourage them and cajole them and inspire them. So that's what I did, and it was pretty neat. So I was able to take those topics that I taught with a flipped approach on Wednesdays, and when I made my exams, I just tagged those on separate pages so I could compare the scores on each exam of those things first introduced in a flip method versus my traditional stand and deliver. And it was pretty remarkable. I got 10 percentage points out of 100 difference between the two, much better with the flipped. So that was kind of interesting, and it got me involved with Cindy ran a teaching circle through ASEA, and that was across the whole country. I'm still in touch with some of the people from that teaching circle, all about learning how students learn and active learning, and that was fantastic. I've since then attended many teaching circles and workshops that CRLT North has presented, and I've learned a lot about inclusive teaching, equitable teaching, you name it, even grading. There was one on grading that was great. But right after I finished that project in 2012, I happened to be in Boston at the Materials Research Society, and I ran into Eric Mazur in the hallway of the conference center. And I said, "Oh, Eric, I did an education experiment. I got to show it to you." He said, "Oh, great." So I showed him what I did. And he said, "Oh, that's pretty cool, but you should blow off the conference on Tuesday afternoon and take the train up to Harvard and see what I've been doing, because I've reinvented the whole way I teach." And I did that, and I couldn't believe it. And that has totally changed my life. I saw what he was doing with team-based, project-based learning, replacing lecture with reading for the first introduction of the material through this cool tool called nb.mit.edu, where the students would see a version of the book on the screen and they draw a little box around it, and then they could write about what they read, and the other students in the class could see what each person was writing and they could annotate those annotations. It was very cool. I went back home, and when I got to Ann Arbor, I called up some of the people from CRLT North, and one of them was Shanna, who's now a professor in mechanical engineering, and I talked to her about this and to Cindy about this, and they were very enthused, encouraged me to write another grant, which I did, to be able to go back to Boston a few times and learn all of Eric's methods and then implement it in my Intro to Materials course, which I did in the fall of 2013. And this involved using flexible classrooms, which weren't so flexible then because nothing was on wheels. And it was quite the experience. And I'm still teaching that way. I teach that way with just about all of my courses. And I've been doing it now, and I keep improving it. But I couldn't possibly improve it without the help from CRLT-Engin. In fact, this very year, I'm implementing a whole new approach to grading based on a conversation that we had with Robert Talbert, who CRLT-Engin brought in to talk to a bunch of us about his book he was writing at the time called Grading for Growth. And well, he wrote that book, and I read it last January, and I have embraced all of the pillars of his approach. The pillars are: have clear standards for every module you're doing, make sure there's lots of feedback loops in every single kind of assessment, having clear marks, none of this 0 to 100 nonsense. It should be simple, like meets expectations, is approaching meeting expectations, or doesn't meet them. 3 things. And you have to also make sure that you have reassessment without penalty so that students learn that they learn by failing. And you shouldn't penalize them for failing. You should give them another chance to improve. And so all of those things are what I have been doing in this current version of the class, with 2 extra things I read about in his book. One was, why do we all just average our grades like Canvas tells us to do? So we'll have quizzes, we have reading assignments, we have projects, we have papers they write, we have exams, all these things that we reduce to a number from 0 to 100 and then use a weighted average to get a grade. The problem with that is that there are units to each of these things that we throw away when we turn it into a percentage. We shouldn't be averaging numbers that don't have the same inherent units. And that just doesn't make any sense. And his example in his book is, what happens if you average all the zip codes in a state? You get a number, but it doesn't mean anything. Just because it's a number doesn't mean you should average it. So that I took to heart, and instead I'm using a grading table. And after years of rejecting exams, I'm actually bringing back a final exam, because then the course is over and it'll be a recertification of their learning based on all the activities I wanted them to do. And that's the only thing. They can't do reassessment without penalty. On the other hand, it's optional. They don't have to take it. Their grade will never go lower. So all of that, I'm working now with Grant Agrisar, who helped me design this whole approach. We've met several times over the summer. We had just met last week, and she's coming in my class to do a midterm student feedback, but this is a little different. She's coming to make sure the students really understand why I'm doing what I'm doing and how it will benefit them. And she's also letting them know that she's going to come back again near the end of the class to see how it went and get their input. So in partnership with CRLT-Engin, I continue to improve my class, improve my teaching, and I just have to say that I wouldn't be even close to where I am with being an educator if it wasn't for CRLT and CRLT-Engin. So thank you very much.